Good morning. This morning, we're going to talk about mindfulness, beginning of a new series. First, though, let's think about our affirmation that we say every Sunday. You could try to do it together with us. Together, in one spirit, we see God everywhere, in everyone, and in everything. So, mindfulness, a Buddhist tradition, and we're not going to try to make it, too modern. We'll go back to the original values. And part of this Buddhist practice is to make some promises, some commitments. And there's five. There's five that we'll be discussing over the next few weeks. And these are promises about how we're going to endeavor to conduct ourselves. And they're promises. They're not rules. And if we fall short, we're only punished by cause and effect. And then we return to the intention of the promises. There shouldn't be any guilt or shame, just the decision to try again and do better next time. In all of our actions, we should consider our intention, the possible outcome for ourselves and the possible outcomes for anyone else involved. So that said, let's get quiet for a moment, do this meditation. First, to prepare, it might be a good idea to let the chair fully support your weight and put your feet flat on the floor. And notice your posture. Don't allow your back to rest against the back of the chair, but rather hold yourself straight. Feet flat on the floor, back straight. And then just focus on the breath. Don't try to change it in any way. Just notice it. And just pay attention to the rise and fall of the chest and abdomen. As you pay attention, your breath may change on its own, but don't try to force it. Just let the breath do what the breath does. Notice. Just notice that as you breathe in, you're being filled. And as you breathe out, you just naturally relax. Just focusing on the breath. If any other thoughts come to mind, just return your focus to the breath. Notice the thought, acknowledge, and release. If there's a distraction, don't try to fight it in any way. Just acknowledge it and let it go. And just take a moment now to stay centered in that breath. Say to yourself, I am harmless. I'm harmless. I will endeavor not to harm sentient beings. I will endeavor not to harm sentient beings. Consider this idea. And as you do, just follow the breath. Not harming goes along with the breath. And put your attention, your intentions, at the mercy of harmlessness. And still deeply involved in the breath, allow any plans that you may have had for the day to come to mind, one by one. And ask yourself if any of those plans are in conflict with this principle of harmlessness. Aside from random events, is there any possibility that anyone could be injured in the pursuit of your desires? Pictures and thoughts may cascade through the mind as you really examine the meaning of harm. Just let this happen. Just see the image and let it go. Intentional harm comes from fear. It shows itself as greed, anger, or hate. Unintentional harm comes from ignorance or thoughtlessness. Allow these ideas to lead from one to the other. Not grasping, not holding tight to any of them. Just allowing them to come to mind and then flow away. And now, focusing on the breath, we return to the present moment, to the present place. Opening our eyes and saying, Amen and Amen. So to be harmless. It's the first precept in the Buddhist tradition, to endeavor not to harm sentient beings. When we think about this, there really are a lot of connotations to it. There are a lot of things that may come to mind that we don't even know if we're willing to attempt yet, but to consider the ideas, to consider those ideas, trying to hold on to that awareness of the breath, to actually put our intentions at the mercy of harmlessness, to consider, as in the meditation, are any of the plans for the day in conflict with the principle, and to realize, of course, that there are random events. Things could happen, fluke and grace, you could call them, and that, but that besides that, is there a possibility of injury to others in the pursuit of our desires? We are to allow ourselves to consider what those results might be. We think about the idea of unintentional harm, and unintentional harm, I think, is probably the trickiest one. We have to consider what we're going to do before we do it, knowing that this unintentional harm comes just from ignorance of us, and ignorance not in a negative sense, but ignorance in that pure sense of just not realizing, not knowing, not being aware. But it also, unintentional harm comes from thoughtlessness. So if we think about this and give it some attention, reflecting on the ideas throughout the day, and just making that attempt. This is just a promise to endeavor not to do harm. And as we pay attention to the breath, as we move through the day, we'll become aware of these moments when there is a possibility of harm, and we'll become aware of our ability to make a decision. So we go through the day thoughtful. We make a commitment to be attentive to our actions. Whatever we say, whatever we do, we want to have the intention of doing it in a helpful way. We take a moment to consider what the impact our actions may have. It's really just a matter of slowing down for a moment, just to slow down for a moment and consider what happens, to consider what will occur should we take this action, to consider what would be most helpful. And sometimes it may not be clear what the best action is, and then we have to just be quiet for a moment. We delay the decision if possible. Usually, taking no action, not doing anything, is not harmful. If this is not the case, then we can ask for inner guidance. It's also helpful to check our motivation. What's our motive? In aspiring to harmlessness, we check our motives for each thing that we're about to do. We can ask ourselves if we're being self-serving. Are we making decisions for ourselves alone? What do we want to accomplish? Are we being driven by fear of some kind? Is our planned action for the common welfare? Is our inaction based in patience, or is it based in inertia? Our mantra for the day can be, let me do the helpful thing. Let me do the helpful thing. May I be helpful in all things. Being harmless, it is very, very helpful to realize that that wherever we are, wherever we seem to be, that we are at home. And to remember that our ultimate home is the kingdom of oneness, what we have called in the past heaven. Now, this principle in Buddhism would be expressed as the state of total non-duality. So the unity of all life is the true home to us all. But right now, we seem to be having an experience of duality or separation. We live in the world of illusion. But we should also be aware that this illusion is one of our own making. And being our dream, we can turn the suffering into peace. We can turn desolation into paradise. We can turn fear into love. Realizing that this illusory home is but a shadow or a symbol for oneness, or if we choose to suffer, it would be a symbol for separation. We can, by our thoughts and actions, make it a better reflection of that ultimate reality of oneness. So when we think about some of the other ideas about being harmless, and we have to look at our habits, we have to look at how are we doing with our place in the community. Are we thinking of the environment? Are we dirtying the environment? Or are we actively engaged in trying to make as little impact as possible on the environment? What's to make it even, more burdensome maybe, but something we should be aware of. What is our carbon footprint? Are we wasteful? Are we dirty? Are we just not concerned whatsoever with the what we leave behind us when we go? So many things to think about in this idea of being harmless, and we'll talk more about it as these lessons go on. I want to talk a little bit more about the practice, about this practice of mindfulness. And we did it at the beginning in the meditation. That the practice is the sitting practice is to sit in a chair or on the floor. And if you sit on the floor, a cushion, is good. And you may want to try over time to be able to sit comfortably in the lotus position. If you don't know what that is, Google it, you'll see. But you can just sit in a chair. Sitting in a chair is just fine. But to sit in the chair, allow that chair to fully support your weight with the feet flat on the floor and back straight. Back straight. This may seem to be uncomfortable at first, but you'll see very quickly that you'll become acclimated to it, and it won't be a problem after some time, and the muscles in your lower back will strengthen. But to begin, and we've talked about this before, but just begin with 5 minutes. Just sit in the chair for 5 minutes and don't do anything. 5 minutes. And then as you're sitting there, you notice that there is one thing that you're doing, and that is breathing. And so then put your attention on the breath. Pay attention to it. Don't try to change it in any way. Just pay attention. And then you'll of course you'll notice that you're doing one other thing, that you're thinking. And so that's fine. Don't worry about it. The thoughts will come to mind. And the key is, though, that when the thought comes to mind, acknowledge the thought, whatever it may be, and let it go. Acknowledge the thought and let it go, bringing your attention back to your breathing. And this is the secret, this is the key to the entire practice. No matter how deep into the practice we get, no matter how adept we get, whatever thought or event occurs, we notice it, we acknowledge it, and we let it go. Returning our attention to the breath. Over and over, returning our attention to the breath. There are a number of other practices that we'll talk about as these lessons go on. But a couple I want to just touch on today, and is the walking meditation. Very, very simple meditation, and easily performed if we just remember that basic tenet that no matter where we go, no matter what terrain we are traveling over, whatever thought, whatever situation, whatever thing occurs, we acknowledge it. We return our attention to the breath. So the way we walk is upright. We walk upright, keeping our back straight. And as we move, feel as if we are being pulled from the center of us. And the center of us is a point just below the navel. So as we walk, we are upright. We begin to walk, feeling as if we are being gently pulled from our center. And we pay attention to everything that occurs. We become very mindful of everything that occurs. We feel our feet in contact with the ground. We feel and we notice all of the motions in the body. And we move. We notice what is happening around us, acknowledging everything that is happening, becoming very aware, but not holding on to any of the apparent phenomena around us. We continue to return our attention to the breath. Try this today. Try this today. Go out into the world and be mindful. You might want to sit first for 5 minutes and not do anything. Focusing on the breath. Acknowledging thoughts, releasing them as they occur. And remember this one thing. As you go out into the world, your walking meditation, and next week we'll talk about the driving meditation. Pay attention to the breath. And remember, endeavor not to harm. Endeavor to be harmless. Thank you. God bless.